In 1972, the Bob Newhart Show brought viewers into one of television's most unusual therapy offices. But once the cameras stopped rolling, the cast's lives took very different turns. From broken marriages to heartbreaking death, their real stories were far more dramatic than the sitcom. Let's take a look at the cast then and now, and how time changed them forever. Bob Newhart as Dr. Robert Bob Hartley. Bob Newhart was born on September 5, 1929, in Oak Park, Illinois, United States. At 43 years old, he played Dr. Robert Bob Hartley, the soft-spoken psychologist trying to keep order among wildly eccentric patients in the Bob Newhart Show. The character's quiet, awkward humor became the heartbeat of the series and turned Newhart into one of television's most recognizable comic faces. But the calm doctor audiences loved lived a far more fragile life off-camera. In 1963, he married Virginia Ginny Quinn, daughter of actor Bill Quinn, and their marriage would last 6 decades. Yet the early years were not peaceful. The sudden pressure from CBS and the brutal schedule of the sitcom pushed Newhart into severe exhaustion. He began losing weight rapidly, sleeping only a few hours a night, and sometimes sat silently at the dinner table, too drained to speak. Ginny quietly carried the family through those years while Newhart continued filming episodes and appearing in projects like Cold Turkey and later Newhart. The real danger arrived in 1985. Years of heavy smoking caught up with him when doctors diagnosed secondary polycythemia, a serious blood disorder that forced him into the hospital for weeks. Doctors warned him bluntly, quit smoking or risk dying early. Newhart eventually recovered, but the experience changed him permanently. Even while appearing later in television hits like The Big Bang Theory, he privately admitted that the illness had shaken his confidence and reminded him how fragile his life had become. Ginny Newhart died on April 23, 2023, at age 82, ending a marriage that had lasted more than 60 years. Friends said the loss devastated him. Just over a year later, Bob Newhart died on July 18, 2024, at his Los Angeles home at age 94, from complications of several short illnesses. He was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills, resting among Hollywood legends. He left behind an extraordinary legacy and an estimated net worth of about $65 million. Suzanne Pleshette as Emily Hartley. Suzanne Pleshette was born on January 31, 1937, in Brooklyn, New York, United States. At 35 years old, she played Emily Hartley, the sharp-tongued, intelligent wife of Dr. Bob Hartley in the Bob Newhart Show. Her dry wit and piercing one-liners gave the sitcom its emotional balance and made Emily one of television's most memorable wives. Yet the woman who portrayed stability on screen lived through a string of deeply painful relationships. In 1964, she married actor Troy Donahue, but the marriage collapsed after just a few months amid explosive arguments that filled entertainment headlines. Years later, she found a quieter life with oil executive Thomas "Tommy" Gallagher, marrying him in 1968. But tragedy struck again when she suffered a miscarriage, leaving the couple without children. Gallagher died in 2000, and for a time Pleshette lived almost entirely alone. Fate took another unexpected turn when she reunited with actor Tom Poston, a colleague from the world of television. They married in 2001, but happiness lasted only a few years before Poston died of respiratory failure in 2007, leaving her widowed once again. Not long after losing her husband, Suzanne faced a far more brutal battle. A lifelong heavy smoker, she was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2006. Chemotherapy followed, then surgery in which part of her lung was removed. The treatments weakened her severely. When the cast of the Bob Newhart Show reunited in 2007, she appeared in a wheelchair, and behind her was doctors fighting repeated infections and pneumonia as the disease continued to attack her lungs. Suzanne Pleshette died on January 19, 2008, at her Los Angeles home at age 70, only days before her 71st birthday. She was buried at Hillside Memorial Park in Culver City, laid to rest beside her husband Tom Poston and former husband Tommy Gallagher, 3 lives permanently linked by love and loss. At the time of her passing, the actress left behind an estimated net worth of around $5 million and a reputation for strength in the face of relentless tragedy. Bill Daly as Howard Borden. Bill Daly was born on August 30th, 1927 in Des Moines, Iowa, United States. At 45 years old, he played Howard Borden, the eccentric airline navigator and endlessly freeloading neighbor of Dr. Bob Hartley in The Bob Newhart Show. The character's clueless charm and constant interruptions became one of the show's most unpredictable comic sparks. But the man behind that carefree character carried a secret he feared would destroy his career. Bill Daly suffered from severe dyslexia, so extreme that he could barely read scripts at all. Every episode became a private battle. Instead of reading lines like other actors, he hired people to read the script aloud to him, memorizing every word purely by listening. If producers had discovered he was essentially a functional illiterate, he believed he would be fired instantly. That fear followed him through his earlier hit I Dream of Jeannie and later roles like ALF, forcing him to perform with constant anxiety hidden behind comedy. His personal life was also complicated. Daly married Patricia Anderson in 1949, but after nearly 3 decades together, the marriage ended in divorce in 1976. They had adopted 2 children, Patrick and Kimberly, yet tragedy struck when Kimberly later died, a loss that deeply haunted him. In 1980, he married actress Vivian Sanchez, but the relationship also collapsed. His final marriage to Becky in 1993 lasted much longer, bringing him a period of stability while he continued appearing occasionally in television projects and comedy events. Bill Daly died on September 4, 2018, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, at the age of 91 from natural causes. His family announced the news quietly a few days later, and his ashes were scattered near Santa Fe, where he had spent his final years. He left behind a respected television career and an estimated net worth of about $2.5 million, remembered by audiences as the endlessly lovable Howard Borden. Marcia Wallace as Carol Kester. Marcia Wallace was born on November 1, 1942, in Creston, Iowa, United States. At 30 years old, she played Carol Kester, the sarcastic, sharp-tongued receptionist in Dr. Hartley's office in The Bob Newhart Show. Her biting humor and explosive laugh turned Carol into one of the show's most unforgettable characters. Yet behind the bold personality on screen was a life filled with devastating blows. In 1986, Wallace married hotel owner Dennis Hawley, hoping for a fresh chapter after years of struggling in Hollywood. They adopted a baby boy, Michael "Mikey" Hawley, and for a brief time life seemed stable. But tragedy struck when Dennis Hawley died of pancreatic cancer in 1992, leaving Marcia a widow while still raising their young son. The shock sent her into a period of depression and financial chaos. Medical bills piled up, and she reportedly had to sell personal memorabilia just to cover treatment costs. The illness that shadowed her life had appeared years earlier. In 1985, Wallace was diagnosed with breast cancer, forcing her into surgery and treatment while her career was still active. Though she survived the initial battle and later even won an Emmy Award in 1992 for voicing Edna Krabappel on The Simpsons, the long-term effects weakened her immune system. Over the years, she endured repeated medical complications, and doctors warned that her body had never fully recovered from the earlier cancer treatments. Marcia Wallace died on October 25, 2013, at age 70, after sepsis and pneumonia triggered by a weakened immune system, with breast cancer listed as a contributing condition. By the end of her difficult life, she left an estimated net worth of about $800,000. Peter Bonerz as Dr. Jerry Robinson. Peter Bonerz was born on August 6, 1938, in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, United States. At 34 years old, he played Dr. Jerry Robinson, the eccentric orthodontist whose fussy energy and comic tension added a sharp new layer to The Bob Newhart Show. The role made him instantly recognizable, but it also trapped him in a screen image he struggled to escape. That success came with a private cost. Bonerz married Rosalind di Trapani in 1963, and their long marriage gave him the kind of stability Hollywood rarely offers, but professionally, he was far less settled. While audiences laughed at Jerry Robinson, Bonerz reportedly felt humiliated by how often he was treated as just the dentist from one sitcom. Even after appearing in projects like Catch-22 and Story Theater, he could not fully break that label. The frustration built into real stress, and for a time he reportedly sought psychological treatment as he tried to free himself from the shadow of a role that had made him famous but left him feeling creatively cornered. That pressure is part of why he turned so hard toward directing. Starting during the Bob Newhart show itself, he moved behind the camera and slowly rebuilt his identity there, directing hundreds of episodes of shows such as Murphy Brown, Home Improvement, and Friends. The shift gave him something acting no longer could: control, distance, and a way to stop being seen as a sitcom side character frozen in time. In 2026, Peter Bonerz is 87 years old. He is one of the last surviving principal cast members of the Bob Newhart show, and his later life has been still remembered both as Jerry Robinson and as the steady television director. His long marriage to Rosalind di Trapani remains one of the quiet constants of his life, and his estimated net worth is around $5 million, built through decades of work in front of and behind the camera. Jack Riley as Elliot Carlin. Jack Riley was born on December 30th, 1935, in Cleveland, Ohio, United States. At 37 years old, he played Elliot Carlin, the bitter, neurotic, endlessly complaining patient who brought some of the darkest and funniest tension to the Bob Newhart show. The role was so memorable that Elliot never felt like a side character. He felt like the storm waiting outside Bob Hartley's office door. Off-screen, Riley's life was quieter, but it carried its own ache. He married Ginger Lawrence on January 3, 1970, and they had 2 children. Yet even with a steady family life, Riley often remained one of those familiar faces Hollywood never fully rewarded. He kept working, appearing in Mel Brooks films like High Anxiety, and later becoming beloved again as the voice of Stu Pickles in Rugrats. The final years were far harsher. The man who played television's most anxious patient reportedly faced serious health decline himself, battling Parkinson's disease and chronic physical weakness as age caught up with him. His condition left him increasingly fragile, and by the end, pneumonia became the illness his body could no longer fight. Jack Riley died on August 19, 2016, at the age of 80 from pneumonia. He spent his last period in Los Angeles, and his death felt much quieter than the long career that had carried him through television, film, and voice acting for decades. Though never the loudest name in the cast, he left behind net worth estimated $4 million, a modest final measure for a performer whose strange, sour brilliance made Elliot Carlin impossible to forget. John Fiedler as Mr. Emil Peterson. John Fiedler was born on February 3, 1925, in Plattville, Wisconsin, United States. At 47 years old, he played Mr. Emil Peterson, the nervous therapy patient whose fragile personality added a strange, uneasy humor to the Bob Newhart show. The character's timid presence became one of the show's most unusual recurring voices. Long before television fame, Fiedler carried a burden that shaped his entire life: his voice. High-pitched, thin, and almost childlike, it made him an easy target for bullying during childhood. Classmates mocked him relentlessly, and even in adulthood, casting directors often saw only weakness in that voice. Yet that same voice also became his strange advantage. It led to unforgettable roles such as the timid man in The Odd Couple, and later the beloved voice of Piglet in Disney's Winnie the Pooh, and characters in films like Robin Hood and The Fox and the Hound. Behind that success, however, his career rarely escaped the same pattern. Directors kept returning to the same nervous character types: reinforcing the image he had spent his childhood trying to overcome. Even while appearing in dozens of television shows throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Fiedler often admitted he felt trapped playing the same anxious personalities again and again. The gentle voice audiences loved was also the reason Hollywood rarely trusted him with stronger roles. John Fiedler died on June 25, 2005, in Englewood, New Jersey, at the age of 80 after battling cancer. His legacy included hundreds of appearances on stage, film, and television, and he left behind an estimated net worth of about $2 million, built from decades of steady work in Hollywood. Florida Friebus as Mrs. Lillian Bakerman. Florida Friebus was born on October 10, 1909, in Auburndale, Massachusetts, United States. At 63 years old, she played Mrs. Lillian Bakerman, the sharp but quietly sympathetic neighbor whose brief appearances added subtle warmth to the Bob Newhart show. Though not a central character, her presence helped give the sitcom's world a more believable and human texture. Her personal life, however, carried far more sorrow than her gentle on-screen roles suggested. Friebus married actor Richard Waring in 1934, but the marriage ended in divorce in 1952 after years of strain. Even more painful was the loss of their infant child, a tragedy that quietly marked the rest of her life. After the divorce, she never remarried. Instead, she threw herself into theater, television, and writing, helping adapt Alice in Wonderland for Broadway and continuing to appear in series such as Perry Mason and The Mary Tyler Moore Show. In her later years, another battle began: cancer. Colleagues later recalled that she continued working despite increasing weakness, refusing to delay productions or draw attention to herself. Even while appearing in television projects and industry work through the Actors' Equity Association, she quietly endured treatments and declining health, determined not to let the illness define her final years. Florida Friebus died on May 27, 1988, at the age of 78 after a long fight with cancer. Though she never reached the financial heights of bigger Hollywood stars, she left an estimated net worth under $1 million, remembered by colleagues as a dedicated performer who carried her struggles with remarkable dignity. Pat Finley as Ellen Hartley. Pat Finley was born on October 14, 1938, in Asheville, North Carolina, United States. At 34 years old, she played Ellen Hartley, the independent, sharp-tongued sister of Bob Hartley in The Bob Newhart Show. The character added tension and family realism to the sitcom, giving the audience a rare glimpse into Bob Hartley's personal world. Unlike many actresses of her era, Finley refused to follow the path Hollywood expected. Casting rooms judged actresses by age, appearance, and impossible beauty standards. Finley openly admitted that the constant comparison and rejection exhausted her. Rather than compete in a system she considered brutal, she stepped away from the spotlight and shifted her focus toward business and film distribution work in Seattle, building financial independence outside acting. Her personal life followed the same independent pattern. Finley never married and often explained that she valued freedom more than traditional expectations. During the late 1970s and 1980s, she balanced occasional stage appearances with work behind the scenes in the film industry. She deliberately built another career to protect herself from the instability that had destroyed so many performers. In 2026, Pat Finley is 86 years old and lives a quiet, private life far removed from Hollywood. She has consistently refused interviews about her acting years, choosing instead to protect the peace she found after leaving the industry. She now lives largely out of public view, with an estimated net worth of about $1.5 million, a modest fortune built through both acting and business. Larry Gelman as Dr. Bernie Tupperman. Larry Gelman was born on November 3, 1930, in Brooklyn, New York, United States. At 42 years old, he played Dr. Bernie Tupperman, one of the eccentric therapy patients whose strange complaints helped fuel the humor of the Bob Newhart Show. Though he appeared in only a handful of episodes, his anxious energy became instantly recognizable to viewers. Behind the laughs, however, Gelman lived the uncertain life of a working character actor. He married Trudy Moss in 1967, but the pressures of unstable income and constant travel eventually ended the marriage in divorce in 1982. Like many television actors who appeared in dozens of shows, The Odd Couple, Barney Miller, Mork and Mindy, and later E.R., Gelman rarely enjoyed long-term contracts. Between seasons, he often faced months without work. At times, he reportedly took odd jobs and small stage performances just to keep supporting his family, a reminder that even familiar faces on television could live with real financial anxiety. Larry Gelman died on June 7, 2021, at the age of 90, after suffering injuries from a fall. He remained married to Barbara Gelman until his passing, and he worked in Hollywood for most of his life, leaving behind a relatively modest estimated net worth of about $1 million. His death marked the quiet end of a career that had touched hundreds of television episodes over several decades. Oliver Clark as Mr. Ed Hurd. Oliver Clark was born on January 4, 1939, in Buffalo, New York, United States. At 35 years old, he played Mr. Ed Hurd, one of the awkward and strangely intense therapy patients who wandered into Dr. Hartley's office in The Bob Newhart Show. This character's anxious humor made him one of the more memorable patients in the show's rotating gallery of troubled personalities. Yet Oliver Clark's career never followed the simple path people expected. While he appeared in films such as They Might Be Giants and A Star is Born, and later guest-starred in television classics like MASH and The Golden Girls, he often struggled with the strange reality of being a recognizable face without true security. His own sitcom We've Got Each Other in 1977 was meant to push him into stardom, but the show collapsed after one season. For Clark, it was a painful reminder that in Hollywood, even a leading role could disappear overnight. Away from the cameras, his health gradually became the greater challenge. Years of severe obesity led to serious medical complications, forcing him to undergo multiple major surgeries. The recovery was slow and difficult. By the early 2000s, he quietly stepped away from acting, ending a career that had stretched across television, film, and Broadway. In 2026, Oliver Clark is 87 years old and lives largely outside the public spotlight. His physical movement is limited, and most of his interaction with fans now happens through occasional messages online rather than public appearances. The former character actor, who once appeared in dozens of television series, is remembered by loyal viewers of classic sitcoms, and his long career has left him with an estimated net worth of around $1.2 million. Martha Scott as Mrs. Martha Hartley. Martha Scott was born on September 22, 1912, in Jamesport, Missouri, United States. At 60 years old, she played Mrs. Martha Hartley, the dignified mother of Bob Hartley in The Bob Newhart Show. Her presence added a touch of classic theatrical authority to the sitcom, reminding audiences that the series included actors from Hollywood's golden generation. But Scott's story began decades before the sitcom era. In the 1940s, she had already reached heights most actors only dream about, earning an Academy Award nomination for Our Town, and appearing in films such as The Ten Commandments. Yet time was unforgiving. By the 1970s and 1980s, the once celebrated actress found herself auditioning for tiny roles with only a few lines. Her personal life carried its own long chapters of change. Scott first married radio producer Carlton William Alsop in 1940, and they had one son before divorcing in 1946. That same year, she married renowned composer and pianist Mel Powell, a partnership that lasted more than 50 years. Powell remained the emotional center of her life until his death in 1998, a loss that left the aging actress deeply shaken but still determined to continue working whenever possible. Martha Scott died on May 28, 2003, in Van Nuys, Los Angeles, at the age of 90 from natural causes. She was buried beside her husband Mel Powell at the Masonic Cemetery in Jamesport, Missouri, returning at last to the quiet town that had shaped her earliest memories. She left behind a respected legacy and an estimated net worth of about $3 million. Howard Platt as Dr. Phil Newman. Howard Platt was born on June 5, 1938, in Chicago, Illinois, United States. At 35 years old, he played Dr. Phil Newman, a fellow psychologist whose serious presence often contrasted with the eccentric patients in the Bob Newhart show. Though appearing in only a handful of episodes, the character helped expand the professional world surrounding Bob Hartley. Success, however, did not arrive smoothly. Platt married Alice Marug in 1969, but the pressures of an unpredictable acting career slowly strained the relationship, and the marriage ended in divorce in 1978. Around the same time, his professional life suffered a devastating blow when the television series Flying High, where he had a major role, collapsed quickly after its release. The failure was more than a disappointment. It triggered a deep period of depression, leaving him questioning whether his acting career had already reached its peak. To recover, Platt stepped away from the spotlight and rebuilt his life quietly. He began focusing on writing and teaching acting, using those years to regain stability and confidence while still appearing occasionally in films such as Westworld and later Nixon. The experience reshaped his career. Instead of chasing fame again, he shifted toward mentoring younger performers and working selectively in television and film. In 2026, Howard Platt is 88 years old and continues to live a quieter life than many of his television contemporaries. He married Gloria Parker on May 9, 1998, and the couple has remained together for decades. Though no longer active in the industry, Platt is remembered by fans of classic television for his thoughtful performances, and his long career has left him with an estimated net worth of around $2 million. Time has quietly changed the faces behind the Bob Newhart show. Some of the actors who once filled Bob Hartley's office with laughter have passed away, while a few are still here, carrying memories of a sitcom that shaped television comedy in the 1970s. Which member of the Bob Newhart show cast surprised you the most after all these years? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed revisiting the cast then and now, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more classic TV stories.